Welcome back to the Digital Symposium 2018. I'm Stephen Green here with renowned technicians Oliver Ambridge and Luke Barnett. Welcome guys. How are you enjoying your time here at the Digital Symposium so far?
Yeah, it's been great actually, yeah, really good. Speaking, all the good speakers.
Yeah,
really.
good. Okay, so we'll jump straight into it. Digital manufacturing and the effects on the dental lab and its services. Oliver, how do you feel that digital has altered the way in which you and the lab can communicate with the dentist and the patient?
Well, having digital allows us to actually communicate very quickly and efficiently with the dentist. If we've got an issue where if we're not got enough room, if we want to do a digital smile design for a patient, we can send all these videos back, which allows the dentist to actually visualize and see a full 3D image. Sending a picture is old game now. Sending a full video, which is what we do a lot of, is a much better version of explaining what the issues are.
So it's the immediacy of that action that allows you to communicate better.
Exactly. You've not got an impression in the post, for example. You're not waiting for that. You can tell them straight away. There's an issue with that. I can't work with this. There's something that needs to be redone. Yeah. And digital allows you to actually communicate that much better as well. Yeah. It gives you much more visualization to everything.
Okay. And Luke, how does the digital manufacturing production of dental prosthetics offer the same quality as handcrafted work, often seen as automated versus bespoke?
It's a very good question. The reality is that I think there's areas where it is much easier to create a better result, and therefore it's highly suited to certain materials, certain procedures. And there's some which is definitely not an improvement on the use of traditional skills, in my opinion, particularly with regard to whether one's milling acrylics, glasses, zirconias or metals. There's definitely areas that's much better. And others where it's better to stick with traditional techniques. You know.
So it's trying to marry the two together in the modern laboratory that helps best. Really.
Yeah, it's finding the best workflow for what you're actually doing.
Yeah, so it says it's exactly that. It's about as in everything that's done in our profession, it's about case selection, and it is something which is often misunderstood. Yeah, but it will become more apparent to people as it develops, and you get the people who are leading, like the Ambridge team, who are leading these things. Yourself, of course, where you're starting to understand the strengths and weaknesses of it. You know, it's certainly not a solution to every situation.
And does it pose a problem in terms of the actual workflow, having those two elements, one the automated and one the sort of handcrafted, if you like, in the same production in a business today?
In mine, it's been and continues to be a bit of a challenge finding that, marrying the two together. Yeah. I think if one were to, if one was starting again a business, a young business starting today, it would be very easy to just get stuck straight into it. I think that we have a laboratory where we've been involved in digital dentistry in one way or the other for a very long time. You know, from early Procera through to where we are today, and this is much more complex. I think it requires the skill. The digital side requires the skill of a really good technician to understand what they're designing and how they're designing it. And sometimes it's actually easier, and I don't know how you gents have found it, it's easier to do things by hand, to hold something in hand and look at it. Yeah.
You see, whereas I'm the other way. Whereas I've brought up on digital, so for me, the digital design stage is much quicker, much easier, and I can get on with so much more. Yeah. I mean, but obviously it's all down to scans, it's all down to technique, it's all down to what you learn and how you learn it. I mean, that was where I started, whereas you guys would have started.
As I said, for a fresh start, I think it would be definitely a much easier solution. I mean, by saying what I've said, it's not that we can't and we don't. A huge amount of stuff we're doing. You know, it's the question of how it integrates into the system, an old-fashioned, if you like, traditional kind of lab, which we still largely are. You know, no, I think where it's good, it's absolutely brilliant. You know?
I find that digital as well has actually allowed us to automate a lot more as well. Yeah. So obviously milling machines, etc. they allowed you to have an extra technician who runs 24 hours a day, 3D printing, all these sort of things are allowing you to have extra people inside the lab, but without actually having to pay for an extra person to be there, or to have an extra person who needs to be skilled to do that. It's all new techniques as well. 3D printing, 3D milling, all of these you need to learn to nest, you need to learn to set up your supports. All of this is brand new technology.
So the automation,
it's
the box that stands on the bench effectively is your sort of extra hand as a technician, isn't it?
Definitely.
So that leads us nicely on to the next question. In terms, question for both of you, as an example of the process between automated digital full contour crown, so let's say a full contour zirconia crown, and bespoke ceramic layering with, for instance, a ceramic metal crown. I mean, how does that work in today's laboratory environment in terms of both what the dentist feels they get as a product and how we see it as laboratory owners or manufacturers of that product? So, you know, how do we see the difference between those products?
In all honesty, we believe that the zirconias out there, the translucent zirconias are absolutely brilliant. And the strength of them is great. Putting porcelain on top of on a metal coating, for example, is, in a molar region, it's not really a great idea anymore. If you can mill a zirconia and pop it in there, you've got something that's bomb-proof, in all honesty. I would always suggest to go that route over a gold crown, over a porcelain bonding, always. Same as an Emax as well.
Yeah, and so in terms of layering, for instance, how would you see that, Luke?
I'm not entirely in agreement.
Oh, really?
Strange as it may, as surprised as it may be, but no, he has very valid points he raises. But the reality is that, you know, with any of this stuff, it's all ceramic stuff. It's all about what's underneath. What is underneath that tooth?
Yeah.
And how is the tooth being prepared? You know?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that these are very, very important factors. I mean, there are plenty of situations where you have a very dark underlying tooth, where you need to get it masked out, you haven't got a lot of space, and you can't do it with an all-ceramic restoration, as good as they are. So, you know, there's plenty of, I mean, there's still nothing better than gold. We must be cautious, as gold is still the best material to put in the mouth. I mean, I would want a gold crown in my mouth from an aesthetic point of view. But, you know, we don't know so much about zirconias and functional things. It's such a new product. I know there's no data saying that there used to be a lot of talk about damage that because the crown was actually too hard, you know, potentially.
Definitely.
That these things need to be considered, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, to add to the answer, I think largely, you know, translucency of a lot of those zirconias can work against you, not for you. So I think with your layering, the layering can often make a more beautiful crown, I think, in the right hands, but it is harder to achieve. And then that's a fair point where a technician can, that there's a slightly more of a level playing field in the sense of who can provide what with a all ceramic solution, particularly zirconia crown. And they are, as you right, they are getting better.
So it would be fair to say that perhaps 90% of the solution is in the new modern techniques, but some of the there is still room for the old traditional, of which we can of course manufacture in a more modern way. We can have laser sintered metals, etc. So we can perhaps marry the two together.
You've got to remember, if you're talking a big difference between talking about something at the back of the mouth or something in the anterior region where, you know, a very complex structure of shade where you just give it impossible to achieve it with a monolithic block.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care how good you are, there are situations where, you know, you need it. It's incredibly hard to do it with traditional techniques and impossible to do it without. So,
okay, thank you. So to move away from crown and bridge and to perhaps look at what may be the next game changer for dental technology in terms of production, but some labs are having some success with chrome cobalt manufacturing now, so removable partial dentures. Is this the next area? Do we think that, you know, there will be sort of a big influx of people taking up production of chrome cobalt partial dentures? And is it something that the manufacturers are going to start focusing on now that we've got, you know, a groundswell behind us of crown and bridge? Is chrome cobalt manufacture likely to be the next big thing?
I'd say so, but I'd also say that not just the chrome materials. There's acetal, there's Solvay, there's all of these more aesthetic looking materials, which, in all honesty, and you can mill in lab. Now, if you can mill that on your big 5-axis machine, you're not having to send it out to anyone if you've got one, obviously. And by having the shaded acetal, you can actually give the shade to the patient there and then. It means that the clasps and everything disappear into the hole, pretty much into the mouth. It's great, is that material.
And do we think this technology, in terms of the new materials, is actually a replacement for cobalt, or is there still, as with a gold crown, is there still room for the traditional but manufactured in a different way within?
Yeah, I'd say there's always room for that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's important to remember that there's plenty of situations, and I say this, I'm not a prosthetic technician anymore. I was for some years, I don't make any more. But I have some knowledge of it. And the reality is that the Solvay and these materials, they do fail in the wrong situations. You know, if something like that flexes too much, it's going to, you know, when you put a composite onto an acrylic onto it, it's going to break off. And so it comes back to that same old cliche about case selection. But I think what is important to know is that the production digitally of chrome cobalt frameworks, you know, when you consider how the level of accuracy that's needed to make something like that, which is not on the level of other things, products that we make, is perfectly placed for it, perfectly placed, and actually to be able to rapidly produce a complex design is a huge advantage, you know.
And so to some degree we could say that in the same way that the metal ceramic crown has been a mainstay of crown bridge work for the last 30 years, perhaps chrome, cobalt, partial dentures will be the mainstay with careful case selection for different materials, more modern, millable in the lab materials.
I would suspect so, yeah. I mean, I think it's, you know, for those who can't, for whatever reason, have implant solutions in their mouth, they have to have some kind of denture for whatever that reason might be. That there are some fabulous prosthetic technicians out there. In fact, it's very interesting to see this resurgence of prosthetics. And I know when I came out of the prosthetic game after my apprenticeship in about 1980, you know, crown and bridge was anything anybody was interested in. You know, and a lot of the prosthetic skills disappeared. There's been a real drop in standard in the acrylic work, and suddenly there's been this fantastic resurgence, and the way some of these guys are doing the work is mind-blowing how fantastic the stuff looks. And it's often better in the mouth than putting ceramic in there. It ties into the whole implant.
The software is really,
again,
really
case selection, really, isn't it? It's looking at the right materials. Okay. So how do we think digital manufacturing is affecting the sort of ordinary lab, if you like? We see high-profile labs on social media talking about the things that they do, but I mean, you know, this all has to filter down to the general guy running his own lab and working there. Is digital manufacturing for everyone, or is it just a few?
Everyone's got to get involved with it now. Digital is going to be the next revolution, there's no doubt with that. But there's entry-level machines, there's entry-level everything, so you don't have to be or singing or dancing, and you can outsource everything. You know, obviously there's milling centres for everything around that.
So for people to get into it, you'd recommend perhaps to start with looking at a small investment, maybe with a fairly simple scanner that will allow you to outsource your designs, to have them milled, so you bring it back in and put your bespoke element to it. Is that
correct? Because once you get involved in owning milling machines, one thing you do know about them is they're going to stop working at some point. So,
absolutely.
So irrespective of what anybody might say, so they are, you know, outsourcing. A lot of very well-respected labs do not manufacture very much at all, because it actually makes a lot of sense to, instead of putting it onto someone's £50,000 machine, to actually put it on someone's £1 million machine. You do a better job, and when that breaks down, it's their problem, not your problem. So, you know, I think there are definitely economic solutions for people to get involved. The leases are available with a basic scanner and start doing some stuff. I think it's an inevitability to it, you know, especially people with the hand skills are starting to be so much more difficult to find, you know.
I think what I find is that CAD and CAM, the manufacture, the design and the manufacture are two entirely different elements to our job. Originally, we saw them all perhaps with things like Sirona in lab, where you have a milling machine. You see it as an inline process, but in actual fact, the manufacture and the design are two different elements that require their own skill sets. Can the smaller lab really afford to go digital? We touched on different processes of purchasing in as much as there are leasing and that now, but is this a way in for the smaller lab?
Well, it depends. They've got, obviously the smaller labs are going to have to change with the times as it is going that way, but they don't have to invest in every piece of software around there. They need to speak to their dentist, find out what they want, and then cater to them. That's a better idea than going out and buying every piece of software, because it amounts up to a lot of money.
So to look at their own business,
yeah,
look at what their client base requires, and then perhaps invest in the right direction, so you're making an informed choice as to where you're spending your money.
You see, I mean, I think the money in some ways would be secondary even for a very small lab, because if you're really not talking about a lot of money, you're talking about maybe a couple of £100 a month or something, which if one couldn't afford to invest that, then you haven't got a business. It's probably as simple as that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I think what we're going to see with the digital is, I think we're going to see this escalation of the digital. It will become more and more powerful, more and more better quality in the power. But I think there will always be those people who work in a traditional way, who will be doing beautiful things by hand, and who won't feel the need to have it. And I think you'll always find dentists who simply won't want to get involved with the scan. And it's very important to know that for many dentists, it's actually not easy to get a really good scan. Not necessarily, it can be simpler to get a more detailed by taking an impression. So, you know, it's all that glistens isn't necessarily gold. You know, I think it's a very important place. I think as Oliver develops the business further with regards to the digital thing, is going to be huge. But I think we never forget about those people who won't get involved. There'll always be, and you may find this separation of the industry, you know, the digital and the non-digital.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, I think that's very important.
So it's important really for the lab or the business to look at what their own plan is, their own strategy for moving forward and developing their business, and to work with that. Consider the options, but perhaps also consider that, you know, working in their own traditional way may still have a place in the modern laboratory.
This is where we are as a business.
Yeah.
If I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
I think this is that thing where, you know, you agonise over the art of what we do, but also bringing in this very modern way of working, and trying to marry the two up is where the challenge is.
So part of the skill is recognising what you can do digitally and recognising what you need to do in a more traditional way, and marrying those two together to make a successful business.
That's the clever bit, I think, bringing them together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you guys for that. So, you know, that's given us, I think, a good insight into where digital is this morning, from two ends of the spectrum, perhaps, from that end to this end. We'll take another short break now, and then we'll be back with the Digital Symposium 2018 later.